So I decided to set up a mobile clinic, which no one has ever done in this town. So it was kind of a novelty. And also I do acupuncture. So obviously that's much easier when the animal's at home rather than being in the car and then going back again. I've just started doing some advanced training in canine arthritis training, which I'm super passionate about. So to go to people's houses and look at like the whole picture, because often like it's environment and food and management, not just the drugs that are required to tweak.
Hi, guys, and welcome to the House Call Vet Cafe podcast. I'm Dr. Eve Harrison. I'm a full-time integrative concierge house call veterinarian in Los Angeles, and I help other vets to build their unique mobile practices on their terms. This podcast is for and by house call and mobile veterinarians, so it is meant to give our community a platform to connect, to share our stories, to lift each other up, and to support each other. Most of us work solo as lone wolves, right? So for me, it's been really powerful to be able to physically hear the voices of my colleagues from all over the world and to get a chance to feel that we truly are part of a community of very real other human beings who get it. While you may be alone in that little bubble of your own vehicle when you're on the road seeing patients, I welcome you to join our community by tuning into our own podcast when you're on your way to your next house call. Whether you're a super experienced house call vet with 30 years of experience, you're a brand new prospective house call vet just looking to get started, or you're house call curious, there will be something for you in this podcast. Each episode, you will hear interviews from other mobile veterinarians just like yourself who are doing unique and innovative things, vets who are sharing their stories, their struggles and challenges, and you can also look forward to hearing valuable information and perspectives from specialists and experts outside of our micro niche. And finally, if becoming a house call veterinarian is something that you've been thinking about exploring, or you're looking for some extra support getting your own mobile practice to feel more profitable and sustainable for you, check out the information in the show notes about my course and our above and beyond supportive private community for members only, plus our monthly group coaching sessions within the House Call Vet Academy. You can also check out my free public Facebook group, which is also called the House Call Vet Cafe, the same name as this podcast, and which is a warm and cozy community for mobile vets to support each other in professional and personal development, in creative entrepreneurship, and in friendship. So thank you guys for spending time with me today. Let's dive into the episode.
Hey everyone, today we have an awesome guest with us, Dr. Caroline Murray, aka the Wilderness Vet, was born in Australia, brought up in England, and has lived in New Zealand for nearly 20 years. She's a professional wanderer and explorer, girl after my own heart. Was happy up of a horse and on a mountain in the remote wilderness somewhere hot, and has worked, traveled, and volunteered extensively in the UK, Africa, Asia, Australasia, and South America. Antarctica is on her long bucket list. She's also a human first responder, search and rescue and civil defense volunteer in New Zealand, has trained in NLP, neurolinguistic programming, and loves helping animals as well as coaching other people to help themselves. Currently, she's doing a mixture of locum and mobile work in New Zealand whilst participating in disaster rescue training and has a dream of establishing a drone network to deliver emergency aid during natural disasters such as bushfires and floods. What an amazing human. Welcome, Dr. Caroline. So good to have you.
Thank you. Lovely to be here.
Yeah, I've been excited to interview you. You've got so many interesting things that you're working on. And of course, you're also a mobile vet and a locum or a relief vet, as we say in the US. And so I was like, okay, yeah, we have to get you on the show. So I first wanted to start out with the most boring thing of anything that you do, which is none of it's boring. But what kinds of snacks do you eat in the car on the way to your house calls?
So not hugely exciting, but I really like eating raw things. So I like raw carrots. I like whole carrots because they give you help with the sugar craving sweet thing, but they're good for you at the same time. And I like crunching.
Love it. Love it. Crunching is like very, very satisfying. And likewise, I'm always like, I have a severe sweet tooth. Like it's amazing. All my teeth haven't rotted out yet, but I'm like really, really bad. Like I could eat candy for breakfast, lunch, and dinner. But anyways, carrots sounds marvelous. Love the crunch. And so, okay, so I wanted to start, we have to start somewhere. Like there's so much to you and so much interesting stuff I want to explore. But I figure we'll go ahead and just kind of pull on the thread of how you became a mobile vet to begin with, and like just kind of what's your practice like, and what animals do you treat? You do so many things. I would love to hear like how all of that manifests through your mobile practice.
So, first of all, when I became a vet, I thought I would do a bit of locuming and then get a permanent job somewhere that I wanted to stay and like. But that didn't really happen when I was in the UK. And I just kept locuming and thinking, oh, I haven't really found the place yet. And then I had a permanent job for a while and it was very awful. So I went back to locuming, just kind of keep looking. And then what happened was I found that the corporatization started. And I didn't really feel that I could give the animals the treatment and care of like the level that I felt they needed because of all the time pressures. And also, I really love connecting with people and talking. And obviously, that's like a time pressure and consultations. And then what kind of forced my hand was in late 2019, when I was back in New Zealand, I had a quite awful lumbar disc injury. And so I couldn't work for ages. I got forced out of the locum job that I was in because they wouldn't cut down my hours. There's only 3 clinics in this town and where I am. And another one offered me a job, but they wanted me to work 10 hours a day because they only offered 8 hours a day to people who had children, which was impossible for me physically. And then there was another clinic that had very sporadic work that people used to go to because everyone else didn't want to work at the other 2 clinics. So they don't really have vacancies. So I had no job in the town that I was in. So I was like, what can I do? And I really like helping people and spending the time that I need to get things done. And obviously animals in their houses are much less stressed, and especially cats. And obviously, horses don't like being transported. Well, a lot of horses don't like being transported, and most cats. So I decided to set up a mobile clinic, which no one has ever done in this town. So it was kind of a novelty. And also, I do acupuncture. So obviously, that's much easier when the animal's at home rather than being in the car and then going back again. And I do pet sitting as well. So I do like a wide range of animals, dogs, cats. I really love hamsters, guinea pigs, rabbits, that kind of thing. But I don't think we have hamsters in New Zealand, and ferrets are banned. And chickens and horses don't do so much like big cow work just because that doesn't really work with the mobile stuff. So I do kind of like a fixed range of things like vaccinations, blood testing, pain injections. I've just started doing some advanced training in canine arthritis training, which I'm super passionate about. So to go to people's houses and look at like the whole picture, because often like it's environment and food and management, not just the drugs that are required to tweak. And yeah, so I don't see at the moment like sick animals as such because we have to provide emergency care for them and everyone else has got their own clinics anyway. So I'm often called as like a second opinion or if people can't get the animal to the vet. So quite a wide range of services and species.
That's amazing. I love that. And have you ever done acupuncture on the exotics, like so like you don't have hamsters there and no ferrets. Rabbits, have you done acu on rabbits, or what's like the most interesting creature you've done acupuncture on?
Nothing super exciting, mainly dogs, cats, horses, and some cows that couldn't get up, that got up. So that was really exciting. I've not done it on rabbits, mainly because I think people in New Zealand are still kind of a bit weird about that kind of stuff. And it's not as accepted as it is in like England and probably America and other countries. But I would love to do rabbits and things. I think it would be really helpful because a lot of them have like lower back issues from husbandry. And a lot of them are kept on their own here in a cage and not really let out much. But a lot of that, again, it comes down to kind of costings and value. People aren't really seeing that yet because it's like the no like trust thing. It's like I'm not hugely well known in this town because I go away a lot and in the summers and work for other people. So I'm kind of back and forth.
I love that you have the freedom of doing that. And that's kind of like, to me, that's the whole point of mobile practice, the freedom that you have. And like, you're such a perfect example of how you can do that. And you do. And like, I also wanted to say, I love that you mentioned how you kind of started out in locum. And I've been thinking like, there's a real connection between locum work and mobile work. I mean, first of all, the people who are doing it are kind of tired of the regular grind and like either want their autonomy of where and when to work. But the more I think about it, the more I feel like locum and relief work are a form of mobile practice. I mean, that's the beginnings of it. I almost see it as like this precursor state to someone who's going to become a house call vet. It's like, you're a locum vet, you're already halfway there.
Yeah, I think a lot of it is like you were saying, the skills required are similar because you have to turn up with people you don't know, establish a rapport really quickly and learn new things. But I also find it's kind of a two-way thing with the locuming as well, because everyone has different experience, and everywhere I've been able to like introduce new protocols or drugs or things to improve what they do. And then I learn from them as well. So it's like a win-win, I think.
Oh, I so relate to that. I feel good about my doctoring skills. Of course, as a younger vet, I had terrible imposter syndrome, especially with my surgical residency. Like, don't even like get me started on that. But at the moment, I feel really good about like I'm a good vet. And I feel like so much of that confidence came from the relief clinics and learning all their different ways. And also likewise having that exchange for the years that I did. I don't do it quite as much anymore, but I feel like that exchange just like strengthens the whole system. Like we all get better as a result of it. I love that you mentioned that.
I think also on that note, like communication is really important. Like talking is not communication, and the locuming and the mobile stuff kind of teach you an accelerated way of how to do that if you're not that good already.
Talking is not communicating. That is a really, damn, I like that. I think that is a really insightful thing. And we sort of like take this for granted. It's like, well, I said the thing. Doesn't mean I communicated it. Doesn't mean
Let people understand what you said.
Exactly right. So fascinating. I think the communication aspect of locum work and mobile work is so important also because you are a business owner, you're an entrepreneur. And so like no one's quite got your back like you do, right? And so the communication is important, of course, for the animal, the well-being of the animal, the understanding of the client, the value that you're providing. And then that gets into the entrepreneurial stuff like, why do you charge the prices you do? Why do you have the policies you do? You don't necessarily need to be explaining the why all the time, but the communication, whether you're saying it or explaining it, there's ways to communicate it that are often required, right? If you want people to pay you to feel that you're worth it to pay, you have to communicate that as well. So it's like kind of next level, right?
Definitely. And on that note, one of the things that I changed after I started, because I didn't have any knowledge about running a business, but I was like, as everyone keeps saying, there's no good time to start and you have to start somewhere. And I found I was chasing a lot of people for bills to be paid, but with time that I didn't really have. So I watched a brilliant webinar by a Scottish lady, actually, and she set up a clinic from nowhere. Same thing out of her garage. And so she did, I kind of followed her model where she did certain things, and so the prices were known. So for example, vaccinations. And so you communicate, this is what we're going to do. This is the price. And then the people prepay before you go. So you don't waste time chasing them. They don't have to waste time paying you afterwards. And also you don't have surplus stock either. So you just order things as required. And it was interesting in the beginning when I asked people in town who were already with a vet, they said, no one will do that. No one's done it before. And I said, well, no one's done mobile vet before. So if they want that service, they will do it if you could explain why. And it's worked really well.
That's amazing. I love that. I've not played much with, I know a lot of people will take a deposit, or with end of life care, people typically ask for payment up front because it's very awkward to chase someone down after
bad.
Like you're dealing with the grief at that. It's like, oh God.
Yeah.
But in the US or, in practice models I've seen, there's not a whole lot of accepting like the whole payment up front. But that's really, really interesting. And I think that's something really cool for all of us to play with and think about. And I think in some areas, some demographics where you're like actually chasing people down, like people are like literally cheating you out of like, theft of services and not paying you at all. Like you do have to get the deposit or they're constantly canceling. If you're dealing with that kind of demographic, which hopefully if you're marketing your practice right and filtering through, you're not getting too many of those, but there's still some demographics that are more challenging than others where those kinds of policies can help. And then I love what you said also about not ordering inventory until you need it, like really small batch. I'm like such a absolute proponent of that. I think one of the things that gets mobile vets in trouble is like I need to have 5 of everything, every type of flea medication, every type of antibiotic on hand. I need it in case 10 patients come in tomorrow needing 10 ear infection treatment, like whatever it is. And so I'm so with you on that. Almost like metered, just like conservative purchasing for the practice so that you're not financially in a bind without having a guaranteed sale of that medicine or product. So thank you. Really, really cool. And then I also wanted to kind of come back to, you had mentioned a little bit about how the rules or the legislation, like the regulatory stuff around mobile practice and veterinarians in New Zealand is different. And as in the UK, if you're a vet, you have to be on call 24/7. And so I wanted to revisit how you've handled that. I mean, obviously nobody is capable of that. Nobody, so it's all about either the loophole or how do you collaborate with a local clinic or can you talk to me a little bit more about that? Because I know that is a big concern for veterinarians in the UK, people in New Zealand. Like, it's the thing that stops people from starting a practice to begin with because they're so concerned and worried about that. And I think in our previous conversation, you said this is a little controversial. And so the extent that you feel comfortable, would you mind sharing a little bit about how you've navigated that or how maybe other people might navigate that?
Yeah, and poignant timing, Eve, because that's kind of like a current challenge still. So, first of all, the local clinics are extremely busy. And I kind of tried to ally myself with them to see if we could kind of work together harmoniously, but they don't really want to as of current time, even though I'm actually complementing their services because I don't have a mobile clinic. So I often find things and refer back to them. And so they end up getting the money for the procedures that are required. So I'm still kind of working on that. So the rules, which I think in all the rules, professional etiquette, like if I see something, because now people are asking me for a second opinion on things. So obviously, because of the GDPR thing, privacy, the owner has to request the records and any blood tests and stuff. So we have to look at them first. So there's one lady who works in this town got round it by she only offered dental procedures on horses and home euthanasia, neither of which require, follow-up or emergency. But she also locums for another clinic as well. So what I've been doing is specifying the services that I do. So for example, like vaccinations, blood tests, the pain blocker injections kind of thing. So in this town, in humans, they say, I don't know what it's like in the States, but in New Zealand, you can only have one doctor if you're a human. And the Vet Council in New Zealand specifies that you should only have one vet. But if people are not getting what they need from their vet, they're going to go to another clinic and experience varies. So nearly everyone in this town is registered with multiple clinics and it's their right to go where they want. And so I feel like I'm just kind of complementing that. But I specify I don't see like animals that are sick in inverted commas that need follow-up or major treatment because I can't provide emergency care for that. So for the care that we provide, so example, flea stuff vaccine, if they have a weird vaccine reaction, for what we treat them for, we have to provide follow-up care. So I specify to the owners this is the situation, like they've all got their own vet, but if there's anything that I've done that they've got a problem with, they contact me first straight away. And so one horse, for example, was just really stiff and a bit sore after the vaccination. So I went out the next day and had a visit and it was all fine. So it's kind of still working through those issues at the moment.
Yeah, so it's an ongoing challenge is kind of what I'm hearing. It's like
Yeah.
trying to find ways to communicate expectations, basically,
Yes.
is the best way to work around this, like letting the client know what you can and cannot do, and then almost limiting the scope of what you will and will not
Unfortunately, yeah.
resulting
Yeah.
what would and would not be likely to require 24/7 access for follow-up. Is that right?
Yes. And so that's because the Vet Council rules are kind of a bit ambiguous. So kind of working through that with them at the moment because we're supposed to offer after hours care for what we do, not for everything. And as I explained to them, in most towns or some towns, there is only one vet clinic and lots of towns still don't have mobile vets. So I feel if they're already with a vet clinic that does their care and I go and vaccinate the animal because they can't transport it or it gets really distressed to transport and I take responsibility for that, that's not really interfering with the care. That's actually helping the animal welfare. But that's kind of an ongoing challenge with the regulations at the moment.
Right, right. Yeah. Well, it's an unenviable challenge to have to work with. And I love how you've worked around it and you've made it happen. And there are people who are in the UK and in New Zealand, and many people are doing and they're finding ways to either collaborate with clinics that are friendly. And in some states in the US, there is a contractual requirement to be in association with a clinic.
Oh,
State dependent.
okay.
Yeah, and it's not that common, but there are a few states that do actually require that. And I'm like, oh, sucks. You have to just hope that the clinic and like veterinary community in your area is open to working with you and understanding the mutual benefit that can result.
Mm.
It's also yeah, go ahead.
Oh, sorry. I was going to say with the benefit, especially with home euthanasia, because I think, like it's really upsetting for owners to take their really unwell animal to the vet and then be under the time pressure of that. So I think offering that service is like really important as well. And because most of the clinics here don't want to do mobile stuff because it's not economical for them and they don't want to do visits. So I feel like I'm kind of trying to help them, but there's not always that opinion from them, unfortunately. And that's not just in this town, it's all over the country.
Yeah, I thought about that quite a bit, that issue. I mean, we have it here. It just depends on the individuals and sort
Yeah.
of their state of sensibility, first of all, around collaboration with others, but also the state of their business. Like I've thought about this quite a bit. I've been on both sides where there is this sort of like either true scarcity or scarcity mentality that there won't be enough. And I think it depends on the situation. If someone's business is like really failing, they're like not in a place to be abundantly, offering collaboration or anything, like it's a psychological place that you can't give from. If you either have or feel that you are giving from an empty cup, like there's nothing to give. And we know so many of us vets are burnt out. So many entrepreneurs don't know what they're doing and are freaking the F out. And like we're trying to support our families and things. So like on that side of things, like I see where it comes from. And on the other side, I see how it prevents like a beautiful collaboration that actually would benefit both. Like you referring patients to them first, you've initiated a generosity. And, if they don't want to reciprocate, that's fine. But I don't know. It's an issue that I've thought about quite a bit and it makes sense why on both sides. And I hope that we can all work through that. And I hope that your community becomes more collegial soon in that way.
Yeah, it's kind of silly because the clinics are so busy. So I feel like we could really help each other. But I think it's just an ongoing discussion at the moment. And I think because mobile stuff isn't as popular or isn't as common here as other countries. So I think they kind of don't really know how to deal with it yet. And I live in a very small town of like 36,000 people. So this is all a bit new for them and out of the box.
It's out of the box. And I think what people also don't know is that a house call practice is like, in terms of competition, there's only so many clients and patients you can see in a day or to have in your practice. Like we're small beans. Like we're really small beans. Like a single mobile vet is not going to harm a whole clinic, especially if they're too busy to even handle their own stuff, So I think the newness of it and the lack of understanding that like this is so not going to harm you. It's going to be okay. Like it's really interesting, the newness and them just like sort of being guarded around it. We're guarded as a profession, aren't we?
I think sometimes we don't really help ourselves help each other, if that makes sense.
It does. It makes complete sense. It makes sense. So I hope that they learn soon that they're shooting themselves in the foot with this. And especially in a place where like you need each other with this regulatory stuff, like the 24/7 being on, like you need each other. Ugh.
So there's a lot of rural towns that are like half an hour to an hour drive away that the clinics don't really like servicing again, or it's quite difficult for them to do that logistically. So I'm trying to kind of get into that as well, or, do like a little vet run and things. But it's funny because also with the clients, like they want the service, but at the moment they don't really appreciate that, like, having someone coming to your door costs more than you driving to the clinic. Like the whole Uber. I feel like we need Uber vet or something for them to like understand the business model.
Yeah, you had mentioned that people that I mean, this is an issue in the US as well too, that people think, "Oh, it's a mobile vet. You have lower overhead, therefore your prices must be lower." And it's like,
Yeah.
well, not quite. No.
Interesting psychology.
Interesting psychology and definitely interesting assumptions. And when you assume, you make well, you know the expression.
Hi, my name is Jonathan Lau. I'm the founder of O3 Vets. One of the challenges of being a mobile veterinarian is that you have a more limited toolbox to draw from. At O3 Vets, we put a powerful tool into your toolbox by providing ozone therapy equipment designed specifically to help the mobile veterinarian treat those tough cases. Ozone works as a redox molecule to help decrease inflammation and improve cellular communication. This has an incredibly beneficial effect on a variety of conditions, as demonstrated through the hundreds of scientific studies available. If you would like to join thousands of veterinarians who've experienced the power of ozone therapy, you can visit o3vets.com or call us at 517-925-8148. If you mention this ad, you'll get access to our online training course with the purchase of your ozone equipment.
So I'm curious. I also wanted to know, for those of you who are watching on YouTube, it's not happening right now, but you had these like beautiful sunbursts of the sunshine on your face. And I just thought that was really beautiful. It was just like kept coming back and forth. So wanted to acknowledge that for anyone who's watching the YouTube video. But anyway, so kind of on that note, I'm curious, like the difference between New Zealand and the US and how it is in New Zealand. What else? Is there anything else you can think of that might be different from the US? Granted, I know you're not practicing in the US, so you don't necessarily know.
No.
Here.
I think the main difference is what you were saying is about that you don't have to do on call, that you can specify what you do. The other thing that I discovered that was interesting, I went to work in Alaska a couple of months ago on the Iditarod, and a lot of the vets there were relief vets, and they were getting paid 4 times what we get paid in New Zealand for a day's work. So that was kind of interesting.
Fascinating.
Yeah. And their hourly rate was quite incredible. And I've got a friend who owns a business in Ohio, a vet business, and she was saying that locums are so scarce that even if you have a vet that's not very good, you still just pay them to stay there because it's better than having no locum, which is quite sad, really. It hasn't really got to that stage yet. The other thing that's happening in England and Australia and New Zealand that I'm interested that's happening in the States is because of corporatization, although the prices of going to see the vet are going up, the fees that they want to pay the vets are going down, which I find interesting and not related to the experience you have. I find that a really big frustration. But I think once you get in a clinic and they can understand so now what I do with my introduction, if I'm going to work somewhere, is I say, this is what I charge per hour. And this is what I normally invoice out, for example, like 4 times what I charge, because otherwise they just see this figure of money going out the door and not like their profit margins.
Right. I think that is something that's similar in the US in many ways, like in the corporatization that we're experiencing here, prices going up for clients, pay for vets either not changing or going down in some practices.
Interesting.
Yeah. And also in the human healthcare system, it's the same here in the US.
So on that note, I think another thing that's really interesting here, which I think does cause some frustration, is because in America you have everything's health insurance. There's no kind of state thing, from what I understand. But in New Zealand and obviously in the UK as well, the health system is very subsidized. So people don't really see the real cost. So, they think like a vaccination is expensive for a dog or a blood test, but I've had to pay $100 for one blood test here in the health system, or $100 for a vaccination. And the new thing here is plus $30 for them to inject it into your arm. And I think people don't understand that what they pay for the human system is actually a fraction of the real cost. And another example, so to neuter a dog here is, depending on the size of the dog, it's kind of a few $100s. I don't think it would be ever like up to 1,000, but obviously depending on the size of the dog. And when I had to get a hysterectomy, I was quoted $15,000 for the surgery and anesthetic. So it kind of gives you a indication of like the disparity and what people just don't really realize that the true cost. And I think that is quite a big issue in the public awareness. And also, like, so for example, for the neutering, the vet is the surgeon and we have the nurse doing the anesthetic, but there's just the two of us. And so with the humans, they have like the surgeon, the anesthetist, the nurse, lots of other people, but we do all of that for like a fraction of the cost.
Exactly. Oh, that's so well said. And like, I mean, first of all, I hope that the 15,000 was subsidized for you. Is that what you?
No.
Okay,
So that was private because otherwise I had to wait a long time, which ended up waiting because they said people just extend their mortgages to get a hysterectomy here, which I don't really agree with.
Wow.
So I didn't have to pay the 15,000, but I had to wait a long time.
Yeah. Okay. That's absolutely fascinating. And I find it really, really interesting, the different healthcare systems. And as we say, those humans, as them,
the other species.
the other species. I mean, it's really fascinating how different parts of the world handle healthcare, because I mean, it's one of those One Health sorts of concepts where it's like we can learn from each other across disciplines. We can learn what we don't want. And, I mean, there's so much to learn from each other, I think. And so I find it really, really fascinating. And I don't personally think that anyone has kind of quite solved the situation about how to get appropriate health or veterinary care to everyone that needs it.
I think also on that note with, appropriate care and also in the time frame required, I feel like that, I mean, we're all really busy, but sometimes people get annoyed that they have to wait like 2 to 4 weeks for like a procedure or something like that. But I'm not sure how it works in the States. To put it in perspective, I had to wait 3 years to see a neurologist, and the normal wait time to see a routine doctor in this town is 1 month. So I feel like that give quite good, timely medical care, and like that just wouldn't be allowed in the animal profession. And specialists here can refuse to see a human for a referral and just decide that they won't see you. So people routinely wait years for things to be done here, and that just wouldn't be allowed in the animal world. So I kind of feel privileged to be a vet, not in the medical system, because at least, we're doing the best we can, and it's not always ideal, but it's done with the animal's best interest in mind, and we do get things done. And, if it does become urgent, we can rejiggle things.
Yeah, that's absolutely right. I mean, it is mind-blowing, the standard that we're held to compared to our human counterparts. I've thought about that so many times here in the US too. And, like we're required by our boards to provide and do things that human doctors would be like, what? Right? And you're like, yeah, people have to, so it's very weird. It's like the right hand and the left hand aren't talking to each other about like, you know what I mean? These two forms of medicine, and the different countries aren't talking to each other. And the clinic and the mobile vet aren't talking. We have patient theme, like communication's not happening. And it's like there's so much conversation to be had that it's just like mind blowing to me. So this is a really fascinating direction we went in the conversation. I appreciate it. And thank you for that. The sunburst rays are like happening again from the window. I'm loving it. Beautiful. So I wanted to shift a little bit and talk a little bit more. You mentioned about the Iditarod and the horse race you had told me about before. And I'm really, really curious to hear a little bit more about your work as a vet and those kinds of adventurous contexts, and you're traveling in the wildlife and all of that. So like, why are you the wildlife vet? Tell me about that.
So early on at vet school, we had some exotics lectures, and I just found them really interesting. And I've always had a thing like I want to do what other people are not doing and like go against the grain. Like I refuse to read Harry Potter because everyone else reads, which kind of is probably punishing myself.
Everything you said until that, I was like, okay, that's the line here. Now you're weird.
Funny.
Did you still not read it? You never read it?
It's on my list, and I heard that it is really good, and the movies. And I've always, I think, so my family is from all over the place, like back in the day. So I think I've got like the genetic wandering gene, and I've always really loved traveling. And so, yeah, I've had been really lucky to have some amazing opportunities. One of which was working on the Iditarod in Alaska with sled dogs, which has been quite controversial because a lot of people, the animal rights people, are very against it. But from what I've experienced there, the dogs are extremely well cared for, both before, during, and after the race. So they're extensively physically checked. They have ECGs, they have blood tests before they're allowed on the race, and behavior like testing. Nothing aggressive is allowed. And then they have vet checks all through the race by multiple vets. And then at the end, they're checked as well. So I feel that when we're there and the race is going on, that the level of care is I mean, obviously we're working in really basic conditions, so we're limited with the facilities we have, but everyone is aware of that. And we have this amazing team of Cessna pilots that fly the dogs back to Anchorage for emergency care if required, or at the end to their usual vets. They have an agreement, and the vets get flown around in Cessnas between the checkpoints. So it's pretty incredible. Yeah. And the Mongolia race was, so it's the Mongol Derby. It's run by an English company. And so basically there's people who I think are quite crazy, because I did the vet stuff and I wouldn't do the riding because I'm not quite good enough. But you ride Mongolian ponies, which are kind of semi-wild. So the Iditarod is about 1,000 miles. The Mongol Derby is, I think, similar, across Mongolia, like the wilderness. So it can be the desert, the steppes, the mountains. It's really varied. And again, the vets are at checkpoints along the way. So we leapfrog along, not by Cessna, by Land Rover, which is often quite interesting because sometimes bits fall off the cars, or the cars break down, or we get lost in the middle of nowhere. So it's a huge adventure. And Africa's like a whole nother cultural wild adventure. I worked in a primate sanctuary in West Africa, which was kind of interesting and also sad. So it's in Cameroon, where there's a lot of logging, and that is controlled by the mafia, and there's not really any way of changing that. And so there's a lot of chimps and gorillas that end up getting rescued. But the challenge is rehabilitation, because where are we going to put them? Because everywhere being logged and we're running out of primary jungle. So that is like an ongoing challenge. And there is another charity that I went to that's really far out, that has kind of bought an area of jungle. So they have really huge enclosures, and they're trying to get an island. So that was really interesting, but also kind of quite confronting, and also the level of poverty that people live in those countries and what they get paid. And we kind of waltz in and do our volunteer stuff is, very eye-opening. And so when I travel or when I do the volunteer work, even if I'm just on holiday, I try and either take some supplies over or take clothing and things over that leave there. I mean, that's not the answer underlined, but, at least you can contribute to what's going on. And then obviously, with our veterinary expertise, we can help the people there and train people there as well, and share our knowledge, and vice versa, because they're obviously really knowledgeable. So I've been very fortunate to have lots of incredible experiences. A lot of that was because I did a master's in conservation and wildlife through Perth University, Murdoch in Perth in Australia. And that opened quite a lot of doors as well, just the networking and people, which was really incredible. And also I speak French, so that's been really handy.
You. And of course you do.
For West Africa, because a lot of them don't speak English there. But as I discovered, the French that you learn at school is not necessarily the French that they speak in other countries. I want to go shopping and I'm listening to the radio is really important. Where's your passport? And you're going to be arrested if you don't give it to me, and more the things that we need to be understanding.
I mean, I have so much to say about all of that. Thank you for doing that beautiful work. And it reminds me of a conversation I had with a client recently who works for Operation Smile, which is are you familiar? You must be familiar.
I've heard of it.
Yeah, Operation Smile it's like the humans doing trips to different parts of the world where they're working on cleft lips and palates for children that could never afford such surgeries or have access to it. And they go all over the place. And my father actually, who was retired, but he was an MD, he would go on those trips too. And so I was like, whoa, when I found out my client was involved, I was like, do you know my dad? But anyway, so she had just like recently gone on 2 major trips, one to Africa and one to the Philippines. And when she came back from each of them, she was sort of like, it's just a lot to hold. Like to be here and helping in this way, it's very, very powerful. And at the same time, to hold the poverty and to see what it is. And like you said, kind of waltz in at a few of like, we're going to fix this up, and then waltz right back out to the comfort of it. But it's such beautiful and interesting work. And there's so many conflicting emotions that can come up around it. And I mean, I can also see, and we talked a little bit about hopelessness. That's like, am I even making a difference? And you can see that in the face of all this, you're like spitting in the wind, bits of supplies. But like you said, it's not like getting to the underlying problem. And that's one of the challenges of doing that work. That's like holding those two things. It's like, I'm helping, but like I know this is bigger than what I can do. And I think that's like a lot to hold. And thank you for doing it. Like, thank you for doing it. It's important work, and it's hard in so many ways, you know, to witness it and to hold and see what's really there.
Yeah, I feel quite strongly personally that for people like us who've been privileged to have and lucky, fortunate, the education that we have, that like we need to in some way pay it forward. And also doing those experiences and travel, I think really makes you realize like a lot of what we take for granted in our day, like having a building with a roof on, hot water, electricity, is not normal for probably the majority of people in the world. And, you know, when we're having a bad day in the office, you know, and we all do it thinking, you know, life's a bit shitty at the moment, actually, relatively not so much.
I hope you guys are enjoying this juicy conversation with Dr. Caroline Murray, and that you will join us for part 2 of our 2-part series in this conversation. See you next time.
Thank you so much for listening to this episode of the House Call Vet Cafe. If you enjoyed this episode, then hit the subscribe or follow button on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Google Podcasts, YouTube, or wherever you listen to podcasts so you never have to miss an episode. This podcast is made specifically for you, so don't be shy if you'd like to reach out and let me know your thoughts on this episode. You can find me on Instagram and Facebook as the House Call Vet Academy, where I also share more valuable content. If you're interested in learning more about consulting for House Call Vets or the House Call Vet Academy online course and community, please click on the link in the show notes. Have an amazing rest of your day, and I can't wait for you to join us for our next episode of the House Call Vet Cafe.